this video, we will be learning how to play better chess by analyzing a chess game played by Capablanca. I think this is a very interesting game. There are so many useful lessons in this game, so make sure that you stick until the end. I do have to say that this was not the cleanest game that I have seen Capablanca play. There were definitely some mistakes here, and we will be learning from those mistakes so that we don't need to make them ourselves in our games. So the opening, very simple. It is just one of those games where Capablanca starts by playing the d pawn and then just the simple development of the pieces. Capablanca was not really well known for deep opening theory. He likes to just keep things simple, as I also always do. Put a pawn in the center, protect it with another pawn, develop your knight. We are just looking to castle early, not really anything spectacular. Black is also developing the pieces, and here Capablanca decides to play pawn to b3, which is slightly inaccurate. This is not one of those moves that's going to lose you the game, but in general it's better if we just focus on our kingside pieces first. So another possibility would have been to maybe play bishop to b5 and then also castle later. But of course, this move is not going to lose us the game. The plan being that we want to play bishop to b2 and also help support that central pawn, which is logical because the moment that you build a pawn chain, that's what this is called, a pawn chain like this, that also means that you are locking in your bishop. And this bishop will not be developed on that side of the board. So it does make sense that in the future, we would want to put it on one of these diagonals. So that's why Capablanca played b3. Black continues. Capablanca develops the bishop as was to be expected. And then we just continue further with the development of the pieces. And this setup that you see here is something that Capablanca plays all of the time with the white pieces. It's also something that I have started playing, although being in a slightly different move order, which is just this setup. This very strong pawn chain, as I mentioned, the bishop on this diagonal, the knight coming to d2 so that it can support f3, protect e4, and also help support a c4 push. So everything is really working together. This is a very solid setup for white, and there are not really any weaknesses here that black can try to attack. The opponent decides to exchange, and this is already one of our first very important lessons. What do we have to do with pawn exchanges in the center? So a lot of people don't realize why specific moves are very important in chess, so that's why I'm going to explain that here. Why do we actually want to get pawns in the center? Well, because if we have pawns in the center, that means that we control squares. We prevent the opponent from pushing more forward with their pawns. That is one of our main plans. And by pushing pawns, we also create possible squares for the pieces and diagonals for the bishops. Why would someone use a c pawn, a flank pawn, in the center? Well, the reason that someone would do this is because they are looking to use a flank pawn to get rid of a central pawn. That is what happened. So we do need to recapture this, and we have three different options, but only one of them is really good, which is the move pawn takes d4, which Capablanca plays. Why wouldn't bishop takes d4 be good? Well, because we are immediately in the beginning of the game already giving away a bishop for a knight, and by pushing this pawn earlier, we have created dark squared weaknesses, and there is no more dark squared bishop to protect this. And if we take it with a knight, which I also oftentimes see players do, we lost our central pawn, which means that in the future, there might be a pawn to e5. Not right here because of take, take, and take, but in the future, imagine bishop to d6. Let's just play a move, e5, take, take, and look at this center for black. You don't want this to happen. So remember this very important rule for pawn structures, which is that you want to always end up with still having a pawn in the center so that we don't give control to our opponent. After this, we have some normal development, bishop d6, bishop d3, castle, and castle. And now we are in the middle game, so we managed to maneuver throughout this opening stage very well here. And black plays the move knight to h5, which at first sight, you might think that this is somewhat of a strange move. Why would someone put the knight on the edge of the board? It's also somewhat against opening principles. But basically what black is attempting to do by playing this knight move is that they want to try to see if they can exchange a knight for a bishop. And that is in general a good middle game strategy, because this is going to create an imbalance in the position, meaning a difference in the position. So black is trying to see if they can put the knight here. Let's say if we really don't do anything, let me just make any move. They would put the knight here, attack the bishop, and their plan is to see if they can trade the bishop by just forcing it into some type of trade where the bishop has to give itself up for a knight. So it is very important for your own games as well that you try to strategically think about this. You don't want to give up a bishop for a knight unless if we have a very close position, which is not the case here. So Capablanca plays pawn to g3 to stop that from happening. And now the question is, what is this knight really doing there? Black uses this opportunity to play f5 because they know that they will need to go back with the knight, but at least by doing this, they are blocking the diagonal for the bishop, and they are getting more control over that e4 square, so it's going to be more difficult for Capablanca to do anything really in the center. The center is very closed. Well, closed is maybe not the right term, but black is controlling the center. Closed would mean that there would be no way of opening it up, and that's not true, but black controls the center. So Capablanca continues. Knight to e5 is a very good move, development, improvement of the knight, and also the queen hitting the knight. So basically black is forced to deal with that problem, and we were just able to put the knight in the center for free. We get the knight to the center, so Capablanca plays pawn to f4, reinforcing that knight. Makes a lot of sense in this position, and black decides to take. Now you might be thinking, wait a minute, what's happening? Black decided to give a bishop for a knight? We were just talking about how a general strategy would be to try to get a bishop in exchange for your knight. So now they are doing the opposite. Well, yes, but there is something important that you need to understand. All of this really depends on the nature of the position. This is now turning into a closed position. What am I talking about? We have a lot of pawns here on the board, and it is not that easy to get rid of these pawns. And that is what closed means in chess. Closed means lots of pawns, especially in the middle of the board, which closes diagonals, closes files, and open means the absence of pawns. So now it is slowly turning into a more closed structure. Black will actually benefit there from having the knights. It's a bit strange that they played knight to g4. I think knight to e4 could also work, but then again, Capablanca could actually return the favor and exchange his bishop for that knight. And from here, this is really going to become a maneuvering game. So I won't go super in depth for every move. I will mostly cover the most important points. But the general thing that I am thinking about here is that as white, what I would like to do is I would like to open the position, meaning I would like to see if we could trade pawns. If I can start trading pawns, we will benefit because we have bishops and black only has one bishop. So that's a general strategy. So queen e2. It's an improvement for the queen. Black plays queen b6, adding some extra pressure to this central pawn, which is now attacked twice. So we need to solve that. So Capablanca just plays knight to f3, protecting that pawn. Makes a lot of sense. And black is somewhat struggling to find a plan. I mean, they managed to close the position and they have the two knights, but the knights don't really have any good squares to go to. Capablanca will just be patient and over time open up the position, meaning removing pawns from the board, and then white will be better. Here Capablanca plays the move pawn to a3 to take away one more square from the knight. Another move that could have been played, which is even better, is pawn to c3, because this basically does the exact same thing, but this comes with the added benefit that the move bishop to a3 is possible. If there is one thing that's very important for white here, it is activating those bishops. And by playing c3, we take away a square from the knight and we keep the option open to put the bishop on a very good diagonal. So a3 there was a mistake by Capablanca because it does the same thing, but it also blocks the square for the bishop. So as I said, not a perfect game here, but still an interesting game. And Capablanca is just slowly grabbing space, which means attacking squares, chasing the pieces back, pushing them back, because the plan is for us to eventually open up the position. All right, queen f2. knight f7, and king to g2 by white. So just some slight improvements, and black decides to play the move pawn to g5, which makes sense because currently in chess, we always have to choose between three different plans. We can either play in the center, we can play on the queen side, or we can play on the king side. Well, the center is completely locked. There's nothing going on. The queen side, black is not making progress here. Black cannot do anything, and white actually also doesn't have much on the queen side. So the tension is really going to be on the king side. The next section of this game is going to be a bit complicated and tactical, some mistakes by both players. But the key principle is that we need to remember that as white, we want to open up the position because we have the two bishops. What does open up mean? Again, remove pawn. So that is why Capablanca plays the move pawn to g4, basically wanting the opponent to capture. They did not, but if they captured, this is opening up. By removing one of those pawns, we open up the diagonal, which means that later we will also be able to use this file and this diagonal as a combination to start an attack. So that's the plan. We just want to open things up. Black responds by playing knight to e7, and Capablanca plays queen to e3. Basically, just remaneuvering the queen away from the file where the rook is at, which is going to help us in the future, and also keeping an eye on this pawn, which maybe we can try to win it. Black moves the rook over, okay, and Capablanca just moves a rook over here. There are some minor mistakes here by both players. Why? Well, there's actually one very important thing going on right here, which is that in this position, I need to cover this actually. In this position, black has a very important strategic move that both players just didn't really look at during this entire game, which is that black benefits from closing the position, keeping it closed and having those knights. White benefits from opening the position. And it looks like white is succeeding. White is attempting to open up this position right here. And a good counter by black would be the move bishop to b5, which activates their worst piece, and it also attempts to trade it for this bishop. And that's basically inevitable. White would need to accept the loss of the bishop by either capturing themselves or by just waiting for black to capture. But after this exchange, it is getting more obvious that white is losing the advantage because we have a knight and bishop versus two knights, and what is still actually a quite close position, and their most important piece was that bishop. So there was some strategic tension going on here, and that's why many of these moves are mistakes, because what white should play is a4 100%, taking away that square from the bishop, and what black should play is b5. So every time that you see like a question mark or an X come up, it's basically because the computer is saying that black should either have played this or white should have played this, because this is a very important strategic concept in this position that apparently was not super obvious to both players here, which is that that light squared bishop is very important. All right, so Capablanca just continues opening up the position. Again, as I said, some question marks here, some mistakes by both players, but all of that has to do with this bishop. And black seizes the opportunity to go in with a check, push the king to the side, and then trade the bishop. And this has been a very beneficial trade for black here. I think even a mistake by Capablanca. At this point, Capablanca is actually even losing, because what just happened is that Capablanca tried to open up the position, but while opening up, we made a slip up, basically. We lost that bishop to a knight. So now the position is more balanced again. We both have a knight, we both have a bishop, but everything is opening up. Black is going to here capture this, and there is actually a lot of pressure against this king. So we went from trying to open up the position as white to achieving our goal, but at the same time losing that bishop and also getting an attack against our king side. So basically more so some strategic mistakes here by Capablanca, and actually also by the opponent, because he missed some opportunities earlier. Which is the main thing that I'm trying to explain with this video, is that you will need to understand this tension, this dynamic play between bishops and knights and open and closed positions, and that can really guide your entire game if you play it well. So What do we have to do now? Because things have really changed a lot. Things have really changed a lot. Well, what we are now thinking about is that our minor pieces have mostly equal out again. We both have a bishop and a knight. The difference being that there is a difference in color between the bishops, which means that in general, white here, if we attack, we will be benefiting from our dark squared bishop, because we can attack anything that's on dark squares more times than black can defend it, because they don't have the right color bishop to protect something. So if we try to do something on dark squares, white will be beneficial. If something starts happening on the light squares, black will be beneficial. If we just trade a lot, we will probably have a drawn endgame, because both players have a different color bishop. So Capablanca plays c4, still trying to open up the position, trying to see if we can maybe get rid of this central pawn, because what we really want to do now is we want to move these two pawns up the board. It is all about activating this bishop. That is the plan. If we can activate that bishop, we can win the game. So, for example, taking this would be horrible for black. You can see the bar go up. Would be horrible. Multiple reasons why, but basically it's all because this diagonal is opening up, and we are using that dark squared advantage that we have. So black didn't take that. I would have been very surprised if they took it, but moving the queen actually also doesn't help them. And at this point, white just has an immediate winning combination, and all of it has to do with his bishop. What are we going to do? Pawn takes d5. Very nice play by Capablanca. Queen has to recapture, and now it is all about getting rid of these two pawns. If we can get rid of these two pawns, then we can win this game, because then we open up the dark square diagonal, and then we are the one in control. Capablanca starts by playing e6. e6, which is an amazing, amazing move here. This is a pawn fork on the bishop and the knight. Pawn fork, attacking two pieces at the same time. And you might think, like, can black not just capture this? No, because of course this dark square diagonal is starting to open up, and there would be a genius, I think even a brilliant move here for white. Rook takes e6. Queen takes e6, and then d5 with a check from the bishop and also a new attack on the queen. So basically, black is in trouble. They get their pieces forked, and they cannot really do anything at this point. They are just lost. There are many things that we can do here. Actually, just moving our queen is being attacked. Just moving our queen is okay, but Capablanca decided to make things even more spectacular. Queen takes b5. Queen sacrifice for the bishop. d5. Look at this. It is exactly what we have talked about before. We are opening up this diagonal. That is our plan. And the bishop is so strong on this diagonal that even if we don't have a queen, we will still be winning this game. Why is that? Well, black has to block. We win a knight, and the material is still better for black because black has two rooks and a queen. But are those really good pieces at this very moment? Well, the rook is pinned to the king. King is stuck in the corner. This pawn is only one square away from promotion. So this looks like a lot of trouble. And white actually has very well placed pieces. These two rooks are supporting the pawn, supporting the rook going to the 8th rank, which would help with a promotion. The knight can also just get active in this game. So basically, lots and lots of trouble. Black is just completely losing at this point. All we have to do is try to bring our pieces closer into the attack. Knight d4 is a good move. Probably knight h4 would have been even more amazing, but this is getting almost insane to calculate. Giving away a knight to add pressure to this rook, the game is over. And if they don't do anything, then of course knight goes to f5. But Capablanca plays this, obviously looking for a knight fork, and black is just lost. There is nothing that black can do. I mean, let's say they just move the queen. Let's say they just move the queen to keep things simple. The knight goes here. That rook is under attack twice. The two rooks have opened up. They are protecting this passed pawn. It's over. It's over. Black is losing. So black decides, let me return the favor. Now I am going to be the one sacrificing my queen and taking that small opportunity, that one move that we have here, to win back the pawn, because just for a moment, Capablanca actually blocked his own pin with the knight, which maybe wasn't the sharpest move, but hey, it's okay. We are still winning. Eventually, Capablanca decides to trade into this endgame, which is a bishop and knight against a rook endgame. We have an equal amount of pawns, but we have a passed pawn, a pawn that can promote. And when you have a pawn that can promote, the game suddenly becomes a lot easier, because you can follow the PPP strategy. Push past pawn. Keep pushing the pawn up the board. The closer you get to the promotion square, the more winning chances you have. So I'll just show how Capablanca ended up finishing this game. The exact moves don't matter as much, but basically it's the PPP strategy. We just start pushing that pawn, and the opponent has to be careful. Whenever you start doing this, you do need to pay some attention, because if we just recklessly start pushing, there might always be counterattack. So we need to be careful. Like, it's best to always make sure that there is now no counterplay before we push the pawn. I think here probably Capablanca could have pushed the pawn, but the question becomes, what if they play rook to d8? There is actually a solution there, but it looks like we are dropping that pawn. Solution would be knight here, and then eventually do a fork. But Capablanca decided to play it carefully. Protect everything first, then push the pawn. Black plays rook d8, and at this very moment, Capablanca found the most brilliant way to finish off this game. It's just amazing. Knight to g8. Brilliant move. Knight sacrifice. What is going on over here? Well, what's going on is that if white moves the king, which didn't happen in the game, if white moves the king, knight goes here, protects the pawn. Let's just say black does whatever, bishop to c7. And it's like everything is hanging, but it works, because the rook has to move. If they take the knight, they lose the rook. White wins that. If they take the pawn, they lose the rook. If they move the rook, we promote. And like everything collapses. There's nothing they can do. So black decides, let me accept that rook. But how are we going to win this? Well, pretty simple. We need to just protect that promotion square, promote on the next move, and then from here, this is going to be a simple winning endgame, which Capablanca ended up winning in about 15 moves, because with an extra minor piece, you always win these endgames.